Welcome to the chaos sector. I know many feel that we target the left more, but now it's time to attack the right. In the previous episode, Michael Knowles was put in the hot seat by a young liberal who used proxy mines to draw Knowles out of his comfort zone. That comfort zone was attacking the left about abortion. But he was drawn out a bit in regards to gun violence, and he didn't sound too sure of himself. Now let's focus on the right's obsession with guns. We don't see men in the Republican Party posting photos of themselves with these guns, right? I'm assuming the reason you see more Republican women toting guns in their social media tweets is because if it were Republican men, which are symbolic of systemic racism, it would be depicted as a form of, quote, white male aggression towards so-called minorities. So they use Republican women as their source of inspiring the supporting base. It has become another societal trend, conservative women with American flags, toting heavy weaponry. It so-called empowers other conservative women, as guns are a symbol of power and have the conservative men drooling over them. It's nothing but a twisted cult, that's why you shouldn't vote. The first femme fatale was Dana Loesch, who we can attribute this to. She was primarily the first Republican, or conservative woman, who advocated for defending her assault rifles. She was a spokesperson for the NRA, not sure about her current status with them though. But nevertheless, her tirades about gun control put a more viral spotlight on assault rifles, due to the Sandy Hook situation. And soon after, the wave of Republican Lara Crofts started popping up out of the woodworks. Examining this photo, Loesch is holding an assault rifle and is perhaps aroused by it. Gawking over the size of the weapon, such power, she feels empowered by possessing such a device. I think they purchased these weapons for such arousal. Going to the shooting range, only to be aroused by the excitement of force the gun has. That is not about your Second Amendment right, that is about a superficial desire to own that weapon, under the umbrella of that Second Amendment right. Understand the difference? These people are nymphomaniacs. And then there's more. I mean, come on, what do you think about this photo of Anna Paulina? Does this depict true patriotism? Or does it depict political sex symbol? The problem is it depicts both in most male conservative eyes. But it's nothing more than a mockery of the left, who are screaming for gun control. This Paulina lady was in the United States Air Force, then made her way to Instagram, then gained a following, and ended up a congresswoman. Such rapid paths to one of the most powerful jobs one could have in the country. It's so random, like they have a slot machine to pick their candidates. It's how Sarah Palin got there, it's how Marjorie Taylor Greene got there, it's how Lauren Boebert got there. All of these Republican women have something in common, can you guess what it is? It should be obvious. It's guns. Look at this crazy lady, Marjorie Taylor Greene should have her guns taken away, because she is literally a psychopath. It's in her eyes, there is no way she should be in possession of any firearms, let alone an assault rifle. As a so-called politician, this is irresponsible, irrational, unethical, and in some way, a violation of duty as a congresswoman. Her job is to uphold the laws of the nation, represent her state, and work to improve the country by way of passing bipartisan laws and policies. But if you are running around with military-style weapons, you are provoking a violence into the subconscious minds of your conservative base. It creates a, quote, thug life, represented in Congress. Greene in particular, behaves like a thug, not a sophisticated woman. And of course, her behavior provokes those psychopaths in society to commit so-called mass shootings. Now let's address something briefly regarding the AR-15. The letters AR does not stand for assault rifle, it stands for Armalite rifle, which is a light automatic or semi-automatic rifle. To be honest, it doesn't really change the purpose of those weapons being used in the so-called mass shootings. In that context, we will continue to call it an assault rifle, as that's the focus. Which segues me to Fox News. I wanted to rewind back to the more vicious days on Fox News, more fighting, more yelling, and ganging up on the one Democrat in Geraldo. Poor Geraldo, he took it like a champ. Talk about fair and balance. In this episode, the 5 discuss gun control. Let's just jump right into the madness.
We're not trying to take people's guns away. All we want to do is keep crazy people from getting guns. And there's got to be a way to do it.
All right, we'll go to you, Katie, first. You wrote books on guns. Your thoughts on both of these gentlemen?
Well, the good news is that there are ways to prevent mentally ill people from getting guns. Virginia is one of those places where if someone is put into the mental health system and their information is then put into the FBI background check system, they are ineligible to buy a gun. Now, in this case, despite the mental health problems that this killer had, and the station did their job in saying you need to go to this mental health institution, you need to get some help, he did. He wasn't legally adjudicated with a mental health problem, so it wasn't on his record. There was nothing in his record that indicated he was ineligible to buy a firearm.
Not gonna get into the fake shooting, I'd have to break all the inconsistencies down. If you want to do your own investigating into the hoax for evidence, be my guest. Just search Anchor shoots coworkers on live television. I want to focus on the reason Fox is discussing that fake shooting, the gun debate.
He passed the background check that all of these people have been advocating for this week. He purchased a very basic 9mm Glock pistol standard capacity firearm.
Oh yeah, that's right, Pavliker. Tell us how much you know about guns. Don't spill too much though. Don't want your dark fantasies slipping out. Probably has assault rifle shaped, never mind. To use the phrase, he purchased a very basic 9mm handgun, is suggesting that there is no reason to believe that he would shoot anyone. A handgun is get this, a freaking gun. Guns have bullets, that when you pull the trigger, oh why even explain it? Pavliker is trying to minimize the threat of a handgun, as a way to justify advocating for gun rights, rather, rights to purchase assault rifles. Make no mistake about it, it's all centered around assault rifles. But in that hoax, individuals were so-called murdered on live television. But I guess this would be considered a quote, isolated incident by Pavliker's standards. Isolated from what though? Handguns are the common firearm used in gun violence. Certainly this warrants a genuine conversation about some form of gun control, right? Yeah, to normal people, but not Fox News.
And so when you look at what's been said, specifically by politicians, Terry McAuliffe, Virginia governor, for example, he implied this week that Virginia just doesn't have background checks at all, and it's irresponsibly false. Not only do you have to pass a background check, you also have to provide 2 forms of identification.
They say here in New York that most guns in New York are coming from Virginia.
One final point. The National Shooting Sports Foundation has actually done significant work at encouraging states to put mental health records into the FBI background check system so that these kinds of people don't get their hands on guns.
Now, I got up early and I was watching Fox and Friends. I saw one Geraldo Rivera make a suggestion that I couldn't believe. You want to amend the Second Amendment?
You want to amend the 14th, and we're going to mess with the Constitution. Let's take the stupidest amendment that the Constitution has, which is the right to keep and bear arms as construed by courts and politicians to allow.
Some of us would say it's the only one that allows for the other amendments for the Constitution.
Okay, then explain this to me. How, after Sandy Hook, Newtown, Connecticut, 26 babies and teachers slaughtered by a deranged gunman, there have been 85,000 gun deaths in this country just since Sandy Hook. And we have 3 times the gun death rate of any civilized nation on earth, 3 times more than Turkey. I mean, what the hell? At some point...
All of the sighing from the panel is suggesting that they are annoyed with Geraldo's take on gun control. Why would they be annoyed? Don't they want innocent civilians protected from so-called mass shootings? Listen closely, as Kate Pavliker sighs, as if Geraldo's take is somehow boring or not worth addressing.
I mean, what the hell? At some point...
This is an attempt to distract Geraldo from proving his point. Let him express his perspective and rebuttal any disagreements. But they keep interrupting and showing agitation, which indicates to me, within the matrix here, do not want any gun control whatsoever. They have no problem with the gun laws, despite huge numbers of gun violence and so-called mass shootings happening every year. The left could suggest that they like the gun violence because they are obsessed with guns, especially Pavliker. We know why she likes them.
We have to recognize. I'm glad you asked. Let's take off the table. You won't amend the 14th, and I won't amend the 2nd. But
I didn't even bring up the 14th. Nor do I have an opinion on the 14th.
Can we get back to this?
Let me make my point.
Once again, Pavliker seems very agitated with Geraldo. She knows what he will express about gun violence and doesn't want him to potentially propose an idea that the audience would support. If Geraldo proposes something very logical, for one, it would make the Democrat on the show appear more intelligent and also more concerned. But the biggest problem, it would expose the federal government's inability to fix that problem. Now we all know they're creating the hoaxes, but in that reality, as mentioned before, they would appear either complicit with the so-called mass shootings, or they somehow are not competent enough to fix the problem. Pavliker, being an advocate for toting assault rifles all over the place, doesn't want Geraldo to get his point across, not just to his political opponents on the show, but also to the audience viewing this nonsense. Lady in Red, always causing trouble. Remember the Lady in Red in The Matrix? What was her role? To be a distraction. Let's continue.
My son now is going to be a merchant mariner. He's had to have education and physical exams and mental exams.
What amendments to the Second Amendment do you want to do?
Why is it so easy to buy a gun in this country?
It's not easy, Geraldo.
Why don't you have mandatory training? Why don't you have a drug tests when you buy guns? Right. Why is it so you can buy guns easier than you can buy a used car?
A lot of changes. Can I do this?
If it wasn't easy, then you wouldn't have so-called 85,000 additional deaths by gun violence since the so-called mass shooting of Sandy Hook. Now some of those guns are sold hand-to-hand within society, but this is where the federal government needs to be involved, right? Why are these guns circulating in society? Oh wait, because police departments confiscate, sell to auctioneers, then it is dumped right back into society. An assault rifle, which should have a separate criteria for purchase, can also be bought. Just like there are different requirements for different types of driver licenses, that should apply to what type of gun is being purchased. New gun legislation is not threatening anyone's rights. In fact, it would weed out the same people Republicans claim are contributing to the so-called threat. All firearm sales are required to perform background checks. Handguns to be placed in Category A, or Level 1 security risk. Shotguns and rifles in Category B, Level 2 security risk. And semi-automatic rifles, better known as assault rifles, be placed in Category C, which is a Level 3 security risk. The semi-automatic rifle requires a thorough screening by the United States federal government before the sale of that firearm is completed. We all know why this would be done, as the semi-automatic rifle is the weapon of choice in the so-called mass shootings. If you are a law-abiding citizen, pretty sure it would be treated as any other precautionary law put in place that you abide by. How hard is this to do? Law-abiding citizens will not have a problem being screened by the FBI. Your rights are not being threatened. You should embrace that process, because it would build a better relationship between citizen and government, in unity to prevent so-called mass shootings. Now imagine if Geraldo proposed this, what would Pavliker say? Problem is, so much mudslinging is going on, he can't even develop the thought to create such an idea. Then it begs the question, why even have him a part of the panel if he is not given the respect to voice his opinion without constantly being interrupted? Fair and balance?
Let's listen to this. Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark has an interesting challenge for President Obama, who wants more gun control like Geraldo in America.
Here's my challenge to the President of the United States. If you think this is so easy, forego your Secret Service protection for you, for the First Lady, and your children.
Yeah, good luck.
And see what it's like to have to fend for yourself. And then we'll sit down and have a conversation so you know what we here at ground level have to deal with on a daily basis in terms of self-defense. I am done asking people in my community to outsource their personal safety to the government.
Total, utter garbage. This so-called Sheriff Clark is misrepresenting what gun control is targeting, with Sean Hamface Hannity in the background. Gun control is creating stricter criteria for gun purchases that will eliminate or greatly reduce the demographic of criminals and mentally ill individuals from getting their hands on them. You can't stop literally every gun crime. That is not the proposal. And what the right-wing media does, in association with the Republican Party, is skate away from the focus of assault rifles. Clark stating that the president should get rid of his security detail and see how it feels being unprotected is intentionally evading addressing the main reason for the proposed gun control, to reduce gun violence. He's trying to conflate guns used to protect the president with guns used in society by criminals. Absolute, monumental, retardation. Politically biased point of view. It's so pathetic. It's not about law-abiding citizens, it's about law-breaking citizens who also have access to guns. If an individual attempts to purchase, let's see, what type? Oh yeah, an assault rifle. If an individual attempts to purchase an assault rifle, a mere background check alone will not suffice. There needs to be an extensive screening of this individual to ensure they will not commit any horrible crime, such as a so-called mass shooting. Instead of so-called Sheriff Clark, who is a so-called officer of the law, who took an oath to protect and serve, focusing on politically mudslinging for the Republicans, he should be giving the president the benefit of the doubt in regards to gun control. You are an officer of the law, your duty is to protect and serve the people. Protect and serve the people. You are not a member of Congress, you are not a federal government agent, you are a freaking sheriff, who should be supporting a form of gun control, which will reduce gun violence. It's not about it being a Democratic president, right? Of course it is, because if it were Donald Trump who proposed this same Clark would agree, blabbering about how Trump is focused on saving the lives in the black community. For that matter, the right-wing media would also use this as a talking point in depicting Trump as trying to help the black community reduce gun violence.
Greg, this is something you've been saying for a long time. All these gun rights.
That was reckless and irresponsible. I'm telling you right now, that man should be ashamed of himself.
Let somebody else talk.
The president of the United States is going to forego his we put that on the air as if this is a responsible law enforcement official.
He is
elected by his people,
by the way. Greg, please. The floor is yours.
I can't believe I'm going to say this, but a Democrat is right here. Clark was irresponsible in his statements, pushing the agenda of fake patriotism to the conservative audience. We all agree there needs to be some form of gun control, it's obvious. The problem with the right is they don't seem capable of looking to assault rifles to be focused on. They have this talking point that handguns make up the majority of cases of gun violence in society, but that's a straw man against Democrats. The Democrats focus on assault rifles because in context, it has a more lethal range of terror within pockets of society. This weapon is used mainly in the so-called mass shootings, and the victims are predominantly children at schools. but Republicans are too stubborn to agree with Democrats that there needs to be some form of restriction or extensive screening in the purchase of assault rifles. And this snowballs into the narrative, which is justified by the way, that Republicans don't care about the children who are so-called massacred in the so-called mass shootings. And they have the audacity to be angry and condescending towards Geraldo in a debate? Democrats, 1, Republicans, 0. Let's continue.
There's a lot of dishonesty going on coming specifically from Geraldo. When you look at the statistics, and you know this as well as Katie, say the Washington Post will say that they're averaging more than one mass shooting per day. What they do is the overwhelming statistics are gang shootings because they know that gang shootings will not get the headlines.
So what they say, suicide.
No, gang. So you're telling me there's not a lot of gang shootings?
More suicide than murder.
There are more gang shootings than mass shootings. And when you look at statistics, you find that there is actually no increase in mass shootings once you look at gang shootings.
Of course, Potbelly. The thing about Potbelly Gutfield, he used to be a Democrat. And in fact, he's a liberal Democrat posing as a conservative for views on Fox. It doesn't matter if the collection of data for mass shootings is mainly gang violence. You are not going to slither away from the point, gun control to reduce the gun violence. If CNN presents a graph displaying a total of 100 mass shootings, but 70 of those are actually gang-related shootings, does this take away from Geraldo's point about more comprehensive gun legislation? No. A so-called mass shooting is 4 or more individuals shot or murdered. That's why the number of so-called mass shootings is so high in graphs and statistics. But that's not the point. We all know each side will manipulate a source of information to fit their political agenda through their median. Potbelly Gutfield is using that misrepresentation of what a so-called mass shooting is by the political opponent to thwart Geraldo's point about gun violence and the ease of access of purchasing guns. Potbelly knows exactly what Geraldo is concerned about, but wants to mudsling instead of genuinely debating the issue.
So you're being disingenuous. You're saying like all these things are happening all the time, and we don't care about dead babies. Screw you. We do care about
dead babies.
We do. That's what you said. That's what you said.
This is a cop who says the president. A cop who says the president should forego his Secret Service protection.
Yes, but
after we've been traumatized with presidents being assassinated.
How dare he? The point he's making is actually brilliant. The point is brilliant. What he's saying is, if you want to live by your beliefs, then you should be prepared to sincerely live by them.
The president of the United States.
That means when you go to Fox News every morning, Geraldo, you don't have armed security either.
A loudmouth, rambling, buffoon. Don't conflate law-abiding citizens and their ownership and use of guns with criminals running around shooting up the place. Those are like two different planets and realities. Geraldo didn't have the most comprehensive suggestion for gun control, but he at least presented something, unlike anyone on the panel. Presenting something shows a concern for gun violence, an effort to change the problem. None of his Republican counterparts presented any solution, because they have their heads so far up their own asses, a solution is beyond their cognitive reasoning. Especially Potbelly, he will never present a solution, because he's not there for genuine discourse. He's there to be the liberal loudmouth he is, as it boosts ratings. Kate Pavliker is another femme fatale gun nut, who displayed an overt intolerance to Geraldo's solutions. Eric Bolling is simply the instigator on the panel. Didn't have to hear from Dana Perino, who I think is perhaps the most genuine on the 5. Overall, this is the epitome of what the Republicans think about gun control. The right-wing media, and the left-wing media for that matter, are reflections of their party's philosophies. And from what we have established, within the matrix, is the Democrats want to stop so-called mass shootings, and the Republicans want more assault rifles in the hands of so-called patriots. Don't be surprised when more so-called mass shootings happen before the year ends. The shooters will have American flags wrapped around their assault rifles. That's how you execute your Second Amendment rights.
And we don't care about dead babies. Screw you.
This is the Chaos Sector.